Hello and welcome. I'm here with Marcy Olsen again, and we're talking about, in this series that we're doing, about marriage after religious transition. And the specific topic we wanted to talk about today was values versus beliefs and why this is important in a transition. So, Marcy, can you tell us what is the difference between a value and a belief?
Okay.
In your words.
Yes, like in as few words as we can. So our values are the core things that are important to us. Think principles, really like, the core, what really drives us, I guess, and what's important to us. Whereas beliefs are more, it's like what you hold to be true, typically based on religious or some outside influence that's personal to you, but you believe to be true, but generally is not factual, doesn't have any facts to tell you that it's true. It's just a belief. It's more of the, again, like the religious stuff. So it can be very personal and not necessarily a worldview approach, if that makes sense. Values can be more, they can be worldwide. People
Universal,
worldwide can have,
yeah.
yes, global and universal. Thank you. So
Yeah,
that's
so
in a nutshell.
what I think about beliefs is that your beliefs are kind of instilled by your culture, media, the things that you hear that color your worldview, and that's what you believe about certain things. And a religious background is very much seeped in beliefs, and it takes a lot of faith to believe in a lot of the things that religions teach us, because the religions are creating a narrative about the unknowable things, right?
Yep.
And to me, values are principles that you develop and that you put high on there on your moral compass, so that when it's crossed, those boundaries are crossed, you feel it, right?
Exactly.
And a boundary's been crossed because it's confusing your moral code.
Exactly.
If you will.
And the way I look at it is the more aligned I am with who I am authentically, and then I'm values based, man, it's just, it feels good. But when you are doing things that are not values based, you feel it, just like you kind of, like you said. And so I want to give an example. And we were talking about this earlier today as we were preparing for this. In the church, we were taught values that didn't necessarily line up with who I am authentically. So obedience, and blind obedience is sadly a value that we kind of all had in the church. And some of us,
the first law of heaven, right?
Law of heaven is obedience, sacrifice. Okay. Yes. And as women and mothers, particularly, there was a lot of sacrifice going on, giving of ourselves. And we thought for a higher purpose. Really what it was not a higher purpose, but to the busyness, so that we could not be aligned with who we really are.
Well, and so religion was a value for living. My religion was a value for me too.
Definitely.
Temple work was a value that I had. So like, how did those values shift once you started to transition out? How did your hierarchy of values start to fluctuate? I know mine did, but tell us how yours did.
Well, and let's remember, for those of you that watched video number 1 in this series, my husband and I, Brad, we were not on the same page. He had already decided, he'd already studied his way out of religion, out of the LDS faith, and I wasn't there yet. So there was 2 or 3 years of very tense, sticky, stressful, sticky, that gut feeling of, is this marriage going to make it? So I cannot stress enough the importance of having a values conversation. Again, we had been married for 28 years. So we know these things, but putting them on paper and being able to like look at them, see them, so that we can go, hey, kind of like having a goal sheet or something. We used to do that all the time. The first of the year, our whole family, how are we going to, in each area of life, the goals that we wanted to have. So we sat down and we constantly do this, because that was 6 years ago, right? In this time, our values have continued to shift. So I will tell you one of the top ones, and get ready for this because Marcy is super open. And here we go. Pleasure is one of the values that completely shifted, because in the past, in our church life, pleasure was a guilty pleasure. I even hate that word or that phrase, because pleasure lights us up. And the good news is probably one of the number one reasons our marriage survived is we had a pretty healthy sexual life in our Mormon marriage. And that's just because of who I am, open sexually, and because I was a communicator. I wasn't your typical Mormon girl, and I wasn't a floozy, guys, but I just knew what I liked, and I knew how to communicate that to him. So as we left the church, that of course got even better, because there was no oh, you're not supposed to do this when you have sex, and you're not supposed to do this, and it was all free. And not just our sexual lives, but we find pleasure in great food, fine wines, plant medicine. Yes, I just said that out loud. Things like that bring us pleasure, and we have no guilt for it anymore. And it's so joyful, and actually has deepened our relationship, having these pleasurable moments together. So I'm just going to put that out there. That's one of our big ones. And that's one big one that shifted, because there's no more guilt. It's okay to have pleasure. We are supposed to be joyful creatures. It's really what gets us through life.
So what are some other ones of your values that shifted when you were transitioning out?
Okay. I would say equality. We both are huge now into equality. I wouldn't call myself a hardcore feminist, but I am very much had a feminine awakening. And what's wonderful is that my husband also values that and understands the needs. And he is, like the whole going from the patriarchal system, where he was also a victim. And boy, did that shift. And now we have I was never like the super submissive Mormon wife, but leaving the church has made our marriage, our relationship, way more of a partnership.
Yeah.
I mean, so much more. So yeah, equality, freedom, spending time in nature, beauty, just enjoying beauty. We love good music. We will now spend money this kind of goes hand in hand with pleasure and joy, where we would have never spent the kind of money that I just dropped for Elton John's last final concert. Yeah, stuff like that I would have never done because guilt. And sorry, that's just old fashioned me. But yeah, everything was, well, will this be a waste of time or money? And I should be spending my money this way. And no more guilt. We're free to have pleasure, because guess what? Another one is hard work. We love to be productive. We are both entrepreneurs. We're business owners, but and it's not like work all the time, but we love working with our hands. We love creating things, and we love doing it together, but we also love doing it separately. So, yeah.
Awesome. So I think if you sit down, I didn't sit down and write my values out until after I'd left the church. But if you sit down and write your values out as a couple, you might realize that your values are not matching up.
Mm-hmm.
And you might realize, especially in a mixed faith marriage, where obedience might still be on the top of the list, and obedience is nowhere on the list for somebody who is left. Where, attending church is high up there on the list of values, but the other person, that going to church is not going to be healthy for them or even an option.
Mm-hmm.
So when the values can't shift, when the beliefs shift, that's where you're going to have trouble in the relationship. And so for me, my hierarchy of values is truth and integrity. That was not high up on my list when I was a member of the church, but it was until the church breached that value in my truth and integrity that I was like, wait a minute, you just crossed a line. And then I was willing to investigate it. And so now truth is like on the top of the list. So if I'm in a relationship and my partner knows that truth is on my higher values, either he better be really good at hiding things, or he better tell me the truth, because that's a deal breaker for me. And if he knows that, great. If truth isn't on the hierarchy of values for your partner, you got an expiration date because the difference, the gap is too big. So another one of mine is health. I don't want to be in a partnership where the person isn't taking care of themselves, because that creates a burden on me. And I don't want to see them get sick and destroy themselves because health isn't high on their values list. And if health is on your high on your values list, you're not going to abuse alcohol and drugs and all the pleasurable things. And so for me, pleasure is up there too. I completely agree with that. Pleasure has been such it just awakens my whole life so much more to being able to enjoy pleasure. But because health is above pleasure, I will never allow pleasure to override what's better for my health. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And I am aligned with that as well. We're both very health conscious, and that it wouldn't work if we weren't. Well, we would have never, I mean, I can't say that at 21 when we met, or actually we met in high school, but when we got married, that wasn't a value. But yeah, we are there too. I want to talk about one other one that kind of came to my forefront was I now value differentiation from my partner and time alone, which never before, as a mother of 7, that again was a guilty pleasure. I felt so much guilt. And I remember the things going around, what would you do if you had a whole day to yourself? And I could not even answer the question. It'd be like, well, I'll go spend it. I'll do a session in the temple, and then I'll write in my journal. And that is not okay. So time alone, because when you can use that time or whatever and give yourself permission, it's fueling, yes, the self-care, all that kind of stuff, having a different opinion, it's okay. And when you have that permission and that freedom to do that, it's actually helps the relationship, because my husband also has needs. He's got his man cave. He come, after a busy day at work, being productive or whatever, he just needs to have his little chill time. And I respect that and I honor that. And I love it a lot more than we used to do, that kind of stuff.
Well, and again, if you have the discussion together where alone time is important to me, I need to rejuvenate. I need this to be able to be a better partner. And but that's not higher on the hierarchy of values for the other partner, then they're always going to resent you taking care of yourself by having time alone. So those are conversations that have to be had, that are probably not conversations you ever had in your relationship before you left the church.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I realized when I left is, I was kind of realizing this before my separation, was that we weren't very good about talking about awkward things. We weren't very good about sharing very vulnerable emotions, and we kept things quiet and very censored because we're trying to monitor the other person's feelings. When we had that conversation about, I don't tell you things because I'm afraid of hurting your feelings. And so there's a lot of things going on for me that you don't know about because you're not a safe place. I at least I don't feel safe. And you were able to have that conversation and be able to create this place where you can share things that might be uncomfortable for the other person. If you can't do that in your marriage, you have an expiration date. That is essential. And so this value, the reason I bring that up is because this values conversation, it's going to reveal a lot about you. I mean, you have to dig in there and say, what is it I value? And really let your intuition inform you about what it is that's higher on that hierarchy of values. And when your partner knows that, they know when they cross a boundary, they know what's important to you. They know what motivates you and what moves you. And they can look at that and say, is that what I want in a partner?
That's so
and
good.
Vice versa.
So good. And I can tell you, if you can do that okay, again, we talked in our first video, the weakest link, or the one that's in scare mode because maybe they're the TBM, they're the one that still wants to believe in the church. If you can align in some core values together, you guys, we are not taught to discover our values while we're in the church. Okay. They are given to us, basically, like we talked about before.
This is what you value.
Cannot tell you the importance of, I don't know how to say this, making sure your spouse knows that love comes first, that you put your relationship over whether they believe in the church or not. Okay. We can talk about what's going to happen if all of a sudden you're like, no, you've got to read this and you've got to study this and all that kind of stuff. You've got to reassure them over and over. And I can tell you that is why one of the top reasons why we are still together is because I could still see and feel my partner's love for me. And that came first. He respected, anything that brought up, that triggered me or anything like that. And he knew that I was not going to listen to him, his facts about anything. And he really didn't push that on me. Reassurance is so huge when you're going through this separation of beliefs, values, all that kind of stuff. So get aligned in your values, those core values, and figure out what brings you together instead of focusing on what is drawing you apart.
Yeah. And I would say, this is my own confession, but I know that before I started to understand what's going on in the church, and before my shelf collapsed, and before I lost my testimony, had my husband left the church, I would have been one of those who would have left him, because the church was higher on my hierarchy values than even our relationship.
Mm.
And so the church was everything to me. And if I went in and talked to a bishop and the church was up here on this value, his counsel to me would be, you need to leave him.
And they usually do.
If I talk to a bishop who has relationship above it,
yes,
that bishop is going to say, you know what, you just need to love him. It's okay that he doesn't have the same beliefs as you.
You need to pray more. You need to, go to the temple.
Yeah. And I think, to me, we didn't really touch on this, but beliefs are fine. Beliefs are what are how we see the world. But when you believe in something that causes your spouse to be a secondary partner or a lost soul, you're putting them beneath you, and you cannot be equal partners. And you start to devalue them when they aren't meeting the expectations that are in your religiously conditioned mind. And that creates the dysfunction and the disconnect, because the church prefers, I believe this, they prefer to have us on the hierarchy, the church on the hierarchy of values, way, way, way up here. And so because we're never taught how to measure our values, we don't know that that's why we feel justified in leaving.
Mm-hmm.
We just know that, hey, you crossed a boundary and the church was number one up there. And the spouse is like, I didn't realize that until I left it.
Oh, and now
I realize just how high on the rungs that it was. But luckily, my ex-husband and I, we woke up together, and we were able to discuss things, and we did start to have dialogues that were really uncomfortable. And that helped us to be able to work things out and realize that our cycle together had ended, and that it was perfect, and that we were ready to move into other aspects of our life. And that's okay too. Our marriage was not a failure. Our marriage was absolute success. But it just
an expiration date, and that's okay.
Yeah,
it really is.
So I honor. I think it's more important to be partnered with a person who has similar values. By far more important than trying to partner with someone with the same beliefs, because eventually those beliefs are going to collapse.
They shift, and yep.
But the other thing is being able to have the conversations, the hard conversations.
Yep. And let's just a reminder, guys, as you're the one leaving the church, you can still remember what it was like. So it's like your view expands, right? You've opened up this thing. So you're the person that can remember the old you and the new you with this larger view, this larger perspective. So give that person some grace. And we're talking about more than just partnership, relationship, marriages, and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about with parents, with children, all these kind of things. Be safe. And for some people, that's super hard to do. Like, no, I just want to come out with them with the truth. But one of the things that I value is super value my family. Yes. And when I have children and grandchildren that are still in the faith, I'm going to be a safe grandmother. I am not going to say things. I'm not going to do things behind my daughter's back, say things in front of my grandchildren. I'm going to be a safe person, because that is higher value to me than digging in there and be like, you know what, no, I am not. I absolutely will not do that.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is you put safety up here and control starts.
Well, family comes up here, whether then I'm going to be the one that teaches you the truth about your religion. I absolutely will not do that. And I have told that to my daughter. I am going to be safe. They ask me questions. going to refer them to you.
And would you say that as a parent, that teaching your children your values is more important than teaching them your beliefs?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I constantly tell my children, because, and I have stated this before, my husband and I don't have the same spiritual beliefs. That's okay. They're similar, but they're not the same. And I give my children, well, duh, that sounds like control, but we discuss with our children the fact that their beliefs are personal to them, and they are free to believe what they want. And I want them to explore and discover those for themselves. So,
And their beliefs are never a threat to whether or not you're going to love them.
exactly. So, yep.
So very
We should
cool.
get
Lots of good stuff.
this wrapped up.
Well, it's good talking to you. And
you.
anything else you have to say?
Nope, just make sure that values discussion happens. It's important.
Yeah, write it down. It's essential. In all my coaching, I'm like, what are your values? And if people say, I don't know, then say, we can't move forward until you start to recognize your values. It's very important.
Priority. Yep. So,
Awesome. Thanks, Marcy.
thank you, Wendi.
Bye.